I am your reporter, Miss Mary Ann White, here to interview Mrs. Suzuki about the Japanese internment camps along the West Coast. Before we start our interview, I will provide you with some background information about the camps. Over 100,000 Japanese citizens and legal residents of the United States were taken to Japanese internment camps along the West Coast, without knowing if they would ever return home. Just because they were Japanese, they had to shut down their businesses, pack up their belongings, and sometimes be separated from their families. Some of you may ask, well, why were they taken? They were taken because the Japanese bombarded Pearl Harbor. The United States wanted to protect its common people from more of these bombings, so they isolated the Japanese people. This unfortunate story happened to Mrs. Suzuki and her family. Luckily, we have her here today, so we can interview her and get a first-hand account of what her experience was at the camp. Let's welcome Mrs. Suzuki.
Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Is there anything you would like to say to our audience before we get started?
Well, it's hard being separated from my family.
I'm very sorry. It's true you went to Camp Menzinar in California, correct?
Yes.
What was it like?
Well, it was very sad there. I never got to see my family, and people were wondering if they'd ever go home again. Some people actually compared it to the Holocaust. Guards shot at people if they went too close to the border. But it wasn't as bad. We weren't treated as badly. But I never got to see my family. We had work to do, but not much. And visiting hours were hard.
What were visiting hours like?
Well, it was kind of like jail, because we had to talk through a window, and we had a limited amount of time.
Did you ever get to visit your family or friends?
No, but my friends visited me sometimes.
What about your family?
No, they're in another camp.
Do you ever blame the United States for doing this to you and your family?
No, it was understandable, because they were protecting the common people.
So who do you blame?
Well, it's more Japan's fault, because if they hadn't bombed Pearl Harbor, then none of this would have happened to us.
Interesting. So do you think this was constitutional?
No, it wasn't constitutional, because they took rights away from us.
Do you think this will ever be prevented in the future?
Maybe, if all the races can unite as one.
And you heard that, folks. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Suzuki.
It was my pleasure.
And that was our show, brought to you by NBC Broadcasting. And me, Miss Mary Ann White. Have a good night.